The haunting. I never expected to inherit anything, let alone an old, decrepit mansion. My great-aunt Margaret, whom I barely knew, had left me her entire estate. When I first saw the mansion, it loomed ominously at the end of a winding, overgrown driveway. Inside, the air was stale, filled with the scent of dust and decay. But it was the bedroom, room 13, that immediately caught my attention. Room 13 was unlike any other room in the house. It was meticulously preserved, as if waiting for someone. The bed, an antique four-poster, was made up with crisp, white linens. A heavy wardrobe stood in one corner, and a large mirror hung on the wall opposite the bed. The air in the room felt different, colder, almost as if it were alive. My first night in the mansion was restless. Every creak and groan of the old house set my nerves on edge. Around midnight, I heard a faint whispering, so soft it was almost imperceptible. I strained to listen, but it faded away. I convinced myself it was just my imagination and tried to sleep, but the feeling of being watched lingered. The next day, while exploring the mansion, I found an old diary in the attic. It belonged to Margaret. As I read through it, I learned about her fascination with the paranormal. She had conducted numerous seances in room 13, attempting to contact the spirit of her deceased husband, Arthur. Her entries grew increasingly erratic, filled with references to shadows and whispers. The whispering continued each night. It grew louder, more distinct, and I could almost make out words. One night, I followed the sound to room 13. The whispers seemed to emanate from the mirror. As I approached, my reflection seemed to shimmer, and for a moment, I thought I saw another figure standing behind me. I turned quickly, but the room was empty. Driven by curiosity and a growing sense of unease, I decided to hold a séance. I gathered candles and placed them around the room. With Margaret's diary as a guide, I began to chant her incantations. The temperature in the room plummeted, and the candles flickered violently. The whispers intensified, now coming from all around me. During the séance, an apparition appeared. It was a woman, translucent and ethereal, with a look of sorrow etched on her face. She reached out to me, her mouth moving as if trying to speak, but no sound came out. Then, just as suddenly, she vanished, leaving me shaken and terrified. The next day, I discovered an old portrait of a woman who looked exactly like the apparition I had seen. She was Margaret's twin sister, Eleanor, who had died tragically young. According to family lore, Eleanor had been in love with Arthur, but he chose Margaret instead. Eleanor's death was shrouded in mystery, and some believed she had never truly left the mansion. I woke up with scratches on my arms as if someone had clawed at me during the night. The pain was real, and the marks were too deep to be self-inflicted. I felt a growing sense of dread and realized that whatever was in room 13 was becoming more aggressive. Determined to uncover more about the haunting, I turned my attention to the locked wardrobe in room 13. I found a key hidden in Margaret's jewelry box and unlocked it. Inside, I discovered a collection of old clothes, personal belongings, and a locket containing a photo of Eleanor and Arthur. There was also a bundle of letters, revealing a secret affair between Eleanor and Arthur. That night, the paranormal activity escalated. Objects flew across the room, and the whispers turned into angry shouts. The apparition of Eleanor appeared again, her face contorted with rage. She screamed at me, her voice echoing through the haunting. I never expected to inherit anything, let alone an old, decrepit mansion. My great-aunt Margaret, whom I barely knew, had left me her entire estate. When I first saw the mansion, it loomed ominously at the end of a winding, overgrown driveway. Inside, the air was stale, filled with the scent of dust and decay. But it was the bedroom, room 13, that immediately caught my attention. Room 13 was unlike any other room in the house. It was meticulously preserved, as if waiting for someone. The bed, an antique four-poster, was made up with crisp, white linens. A heavy wardrobe stood in one corner, and a large mirror hung on the wall opposite the bed. The air in the room felt different, colder, almost as if it were alive. My first night in the mansion was restless. Every creak and groan of the old house set my nerves on edge. Around midnight, I heard a faint whispering, so soft it was almost imperceptible. I strained to listen, but it faded away. I convinced myself it was just my imagination and tried to sleep, but the feeling of being watched lingered. The next day, while exploring the mansion, I found an old diary in the attic. It belonged to Margaret. As I read through it, I learned about her fascination with the paranormal. She had conducted numerous seances in room 13, attempting to contact the spirit of her deceased husband, Arthur. Her entries grew increasingly erratic, filled with references to shadows and whispers. The whispering continued each night. It grew louder, more distinct, and I could almost make out words. One night, I followed the sound to room 13. The whispers seemed to emanate from the mirror. As I approached, my reflection seemed to shimmer, and for a moment, I thought I saw another figure standing behind me. I turned quickly, but the room was empty. Driven by curiosity and a growing sense of unease, I decided to hold a seance. I gathered candles and placed them around the room. With Margaret's diary as a guide, I began to chant her incantations. The temperature in the room plummeted, and the candles flickered violently. The whispers intensified, now coming from all around me. During the seance, an apparition appeared. It was a woman, translucent and ethereal, with a look of sorrow etched on her face. She reached out to me, her mouth moving as if trying to speak, but no sound came out. Then, just as suddenly, she vanished, leaving me shaken and The manor. It started with a letter from a lawyer's office, notifying me of an unexpected inheritance. My great-aunt Beatrice, whom I barely remembered, had passed away and left me Briarwood Manor. Curious and with a hint of excitement, I decided to visit the old mansion. Little did I know, this decision would change my life forever. Briarwood Manor loomed tall and dark as I approached. The Victorian-era house was beautiful in a haunting way, with ivy creeping up its stone walls and cracked windows staring out like hollow eyes. Inside, the air was musty, and the silence was oppressive. The caretaker handed me the keys and left without saying much, leaving me alone to explore my new home. As I wandered through the house, I found myself drawn to a particular room, my great-aunt's old bedroom. It was an eerie space, frozen in time. Her belongings were still there, neatly arranged as if she might return at any moment. A large, ornate bed dominated the room, and a sense of unease settled over me as I stood there. That night, I decided to sleep in the master bedroom, despite my growing apprehension. The bed was surprisingly comfortable, and exhaustion quickly overtook me. But as I drifted off, I felt a chill in the air and heard faint whispers that seemed to come from the walls themselves. I told myself it was just my imagination, but sleep was restless and filled with unsettling dreams. The next morning, I awoke to find strange marks on the walls, as if someone had been scratching at them with fingernails. The whispers from the previous night echoed in my mind. Determined to uncover the truth, I began to search the room more thoroughly, finding old diaries and letters that hinted at a dark past. Aunt Beatrice's diary revealed a history of torment and sorrow. She wrote about hearing voices and seeing shadows in her room, and about a tragic love affair that ended in betrayal. Her words painted a picture of a woman slowly descending into madness, convinced that her bedroom was cursed. That night, I saw it for the first time, a shadowy figure standing at the foot of the bed. My heart pounded as I stared, unable to move or scream. The figure seemed to dissolve into the darkness, leaving me shaken and terrified. I knew then that whatever haunted this house was real. Desperate for answers, I visited the local library and historical society. The town historian told me tales of Briarwood Manor's dark past, including rumors of a forbidden love and a vengeful spirit. Armed with this knowledge, I returned to the manor, determined to face whatever lurked within its walls. I decided to hold a séance, hoping to contact Aunt Beatrice and find out more about the spirit haunting her room. With the help of a local medium, we gathered in the bedroom. As the seance began, the temperature dropped, and the whispers grew louder. The medium's voice changed, and she spoke in a tone that was not her own, revealing the spirit's name, Margaret. Margaret's story unfolded through the medium. She had been a maid at Briarwood Manor, deeply in love with its owner, who betrayed her trust and drove her to despair. In her final moments, she cursed the house and its inhabitants, vowing to make them suffer as she had suffered. After the seance, Margaret's appearances became more frequent and more terrifying. She would stand at the foot of the bed, her eyes filled with rage and sorrow. Objects moved on their own, and cold spots followed me throughout the house. The atmosphere grew increasingly oppressive, and I felt my sanity slipping. I decided I couldn't stay in the manor any longer. Packing my bags, I made my way to the front door, only to find it wouldn't budge. Every exit was sealed, and the whispers grew louder, mocking my attempts to leave. It was clear that Margaret wouldn't let me go so easily. In my desperation, I explored the house further, hoping to find another way out. In the attic, I discovered a hidden room, sealed off from the rest of the house. Inside, I found more letters and journals, revealing the full extent of Margaret's torment and Beatrice's guilt over the curse she believed she had inherited. I decided to confront Margaret directly, to try and reason with her spirit. Returning to the bedroom, I called out to her, asking her to show herself. The room grew colder, and she appeared, more solid than ever before. Her eyes burned with anger, but I pleaded with her, telling her that I wanted to help her find peace. To my surprise, Margaret listened. She revealed that the key to breaking the curse lay in an old locket, hidden somewhere in the house. The locket contained a photo of her and her lover, and she believed that destroying it would release her spirit. With renewed hope, I began searching the manor for the locket. After days of searching, I found the locket hidden behind a loose brick in the fireplace. Holding it in my hand, I felt a strange connection to Margaret, as if I could sense her pain and sorrow. I knew what I had to do, but destroying it felt wrong somehow. I decided to seek guidance from the medium again. She advised that instead of destroying the locket, I should try to reconcile Margaret's spirit with her past. We performed another seance, this time in the hidden room, with the locket at the center. As we called out to Margaret, the room filled with an icy wind, and her spirit appeared, more human than ever. I spoke to Margaret, telling her that I understood her pain and that it was time to let go of her anger. I placed the locket on the floor and stepped back, watching as her spirit approached it. Tears streamed down her ghostly face as she touched the locket, and the room was filled with a blinding light. When the light faded, Margaret was gone, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. The whispers ceased, and the house felt lighter, almost welcoming. The front door, which had been sealed, now opened easily. I knew that Margaret had found peace at last, and the curse was broken. In the days that followed, I decided to stay at Briarwood Manor. The house, once a place of terror, now felt like a true home. I renovated the manor, preserving its history but giving it a fresh start. The bedroom, once a site of so much pain, became a place of tranquility. And now and then, I would find small signs that Margaret was still there, watching over the house, but no longer filled with rage. She was at peace, and so was I. The room. When I inherited my grandmother's old Victorian house, it was both a blessing and a curse. The house had stood for over a century, filled with family history and memories. I moved in to take care of it, intending to restore it to its former glory. But from the first night, I felt an unsettling presence. The air in the house was thick as if it held secrets waiting to be uncovered. Among the many rooms, one stood out, the bedroom at the end of the second-floor hallway. My grandmother had always kept it locked, saying it was used for storage. But when I unlocked it, I found an old, untouched bedroom, preserved as if someone had left it just yesterday. The room was filled with antique furniture, a large four-poster bed, and an old vanity with a cracked mirror. It was beautiful, yet something about it felt wrong. I decided to sleep in the room that night, hoping to connect with my family's past. As I lay in bed, I heard whispers, too faint to understand but clear enough to send chills down my spine. The temperature dropped, and I felt a cold breath on my neck. Turning on the lamp, I saw nothing but shadows dancing on the walls. Sleep came fitfully, plagued by strange dreams of a woman crying. The next morning, I noticed something odd about the mirror on the vanity. The crack seemed to have grown, spiderwebbing across the surface. When I looked into it, I saw a shadowy figure standing behind me, but when I turned around, the room was empty. My heart raced, but I convinced myself it was just my imagination. While cleaning out the drawers, I found an old journal. It belonged to my great-aunt Margaret, who had died young under mysterious circumstances. Her entries were filled with references to the bedroom and the mirror. She wrote about seeing a woman in white who would appear in the mirror at night, whispering her name and asking for help. That night, I heard footsteps in the hallway. They were slow and deliberate, and seemed to stop right outside the bedroom door. Gathering my courage, I opened the door but found only darkness. The footsteps resumed as soon as I closed the door, this time accompanied by a faint sobbing. Sleep was impossible, and I spent the night with the lights on. Desperate for answers, I invited a local medium, Mrs. Whitfield, to conduct a séance. She warned me that the house was filled with restless spirits, particularly in the old bedroom. As we sat around the table, the room grew colder, and the air seemed to hum with energy. Mrs. Whitfield spoke to the spirits, asking them to reveal themselves. Suddenly, the table shook, and we heard a voice, faint but clear, saying, "Help her." The next night, I saw her. The woman in white appeared in the mirror, her eyes filled with sorrow. She reached out, her fingers touching the glass from the other side. I tried to speak to her, but she vanished as quickly as she had appeared. Determined to help, I delved deeper into the journal, hoping to find a way to free her. That night, I had a vivid dream. I was in the old bedroom, but it was different. The furniture was new, and there was a sense of warmth. Margaret was there, talking to the woman in white, who introduced herself as Elizabeth. She spoke of a tragedy, of love and betrayal, and of being trapped in the room for eternity. I woke with a start, the details etched in my mind. I visited the local library to research Elizabeth. I discovered that she had lived in the house over a century ago and had been in love with a man named Thomas. Their love affair ended in tragedy when Thomas betrayed her, leading to her untimely death. Elizabeth's spirit was bound to the room, unable to move on. Returning to the house, I found a message scrawled on the bedroom wall, "Leave while you can." The room was colder than ever, and the feeling of dread was overwhelming. But I couldn't leave, not without helping Elizabeth. The whispers were growing louder, more insistent. I realized the key to freeing Elizabeth lay in the old lock on the bedroom door. The lock had been replaced several times over the years, but the original key was still in the house somewhere. I searched through every drawer, every closet until I found it, a rusty, ornate key hidden in the attic. Following instructions I found in Margaret's journal, I prepared a ritual to break the curse. I needed to perform it at midnight, using the key to unlock the door and a mirror to act as a portal. As I began, the room grew darker, and the air buzzed with electricity. Elizabeth appeared in the mirror, watching me with hopeful eyes. As I performed the ritual, the room shook violently. Shadows emerged from the corners, coalescing into the form of Thomas. His eyes were filled with malice, and he tried to stop me, but I pressed on, reciting the words Margaret had written. Elizabeth's reflection grew brighter, pushing back against Thomas's darkness. With a final burst of energy, the mirror shattered, and a brilliant light filled the room. Thomas's figure dissolved into the air, and Elizabeth's spirit was freed. She smiled at me, mouthing the words, "Thank you," before disappearing. The temperature in the room returned to normal, and the oppressive feeling lifted. For the first time since moving in, the house felt peaceful. The whispers had ceased, and the cold spots were gone. I cleaned up the remnants of the ritual, feeling a sense of accomplishment. But there was still a nagging feeling that something was left unresolved. While sorting through more of Margaret's belongings, I found a letter addressed to me. It was dated shortly before her death and spoke of the curse on the house. She warned that freeing Elizabeth was only the first step. The house itself held darker secrets that needed to be uncovered. The letter mentioned a hidden room in the cellar, where Thomas had conducted dark rituals. Armed with a flashlight, I ventured into the cellar and found a concealed door behind a stack of old crates. The air inside was stale and filled with the scent of decay. Symbols were etched into the walls, and in the center of the room was a stone altar. I uncovered documents revealing that Thomas had been involved in occult practices, seeking immortality. His betrayal of Elizabeth was part of a ritual gone wrong, binding both their spirits to the house. To truly lift the curse, I needed to destroy the altar and the artifacts Thomas had used. With a sense of urgency, I gathered the artifacts and placed them on the altar. Using a hammer and chisel, I broke the stone, chanting words from Margaret's journal. The room shook, and a dark cloud emerged, dissipating into the air. The house groaned as if sighing in relief. The curse was lifted. I emerged from the cellar, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The house was finally free of its dark past, and so was I. I had faced the spirits, uncovered the secrets, and broken the curse. Now, the old bedroom was just a room, filled with the warmth and memories of my family. The whispers were gone, but the stories would live on, passed down through the generations as a reminder of the haunted room and the spirit I had helped set free.